Tonight is Monday, September 24th, 2018. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We will call the meeting to order. Would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify.
I second
How
it.
about a second?
Second.
Sorry. John with a second, thank you. All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes from our September 10th, 2018 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 4 through 6. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 7 and concludes with the resolution on page 22, and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000 to Metering Technology Solutions for 100 water meters for $13,400, to S&S Tree Specialists for 2018 tree grinding for $15,000, to Minnesota Boardwalks LLD for floating fishing pier for $19,500. Following surplus items, a Hewlett-Packard printer will be listed for sale. There are 21 names listed as election judges for the upcoming November 6, 2018 general election. Thank all of those people. We also have a employee appointment to Calum Heldberg as a part-time high school work study at $9.65 per hour, plus the regular schedule of disbursements for September 6, 2018 through September 19th, 2018. Are there any questions, changes? The consent agenda. If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Now, any questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Koenig,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next, we have unfinished business, and the first thing we have is the Lincoln Drive Street vacation correction. Todd?
Mayor, members, I wish I could tell you there's a fascinating story with this, but frankly, we just made an error on the legal description, and so it wasn't recordable. We're trying to correct that error through your action. So it includes rescinding the previous resolution, 2018-126, and then approving that same resolution with the appropriate legal description in it. So it's all recordable, which is on page 24.
Okay. Questions? The resolution rescinding Resolution 126 and replacing it with the new one is on page 24. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Koenig,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next, we go to new business, and the first up is the 2019 preliminary levy.
Mayor and members, the information starts on page 25, and this is essentially what we provided you on Monday night for your workshop. You indicated that you wanted to have that come back to you, and you wish to have another discussion about this later. But as you know, state law requires that the preliminary levy be set before the end of September. You don't have another regular meeting scheduled before the end of September. The final levy can be less than the preliminary levy, obviously then it cannot be more. I guess it could be the exact same as well, the same or less, but it cannot be more. What you see included in the resolution is approving this preliminary levy and then setting what we used to call a truth in taxation date. It's not technically called that anymore, but a date at which the council would take action on the final levy is set as part of that resolution, and that would be on December 10th. Let me talk about just a few of the bullet points that I think are important and then direct you to the last page of the memo, which I think is very important as well, which is on page 32. First of all, the general fund expenditures, there's a planned increase of about $220,000, a levy increase of about $282,000. The difference between those two numbers is additional debt service that we plan to undertake that would be funded through the levy. The estimated tax rate would change from 50.01 to 50.71, and that's the best estimate we have at this point. That could change as additional information is developed, but that's the best estimate that we have so far. We're also planning to use approximately $154,000 in reserves. I think that's important to mention and is articulated on page 34. The reason for that is a couple-fold, but the opportunity maybe additionally presents itself because we anticipate ending up this year in what some might term the black, about $175,000, give or take a little bit. Now, we're not to the end of the year yet, but that's where our projection is so far. By approving this thus far, this would leave projected reserves at the end of 2019 at about 50.5. Again, you can set a lower levy, but you could not go up from the preliminary levy. If you'd like, Mayor and members, I am 100% confident that based on future discussion, this will be changed. This will not be exactly what you end up with on December 10th. And if you want, we can certainly go through at a much higher level of detail some of the information that's included in the packet on page 27 or 28 that shows your financial position today. On page 30, we talk about a number of things, including what we anticipate thus far for the equipment certificate. But as the council discussed last Monday, you might want to change that around a little bit. And so you've asked us for a little bit additional information for that future discussion. This also sets special revenue funds, so it's just not about the general fund levy. And that's articulated on the top of page 30, where we're really setting the levy for a couple of things, which include taxes collected for library services and the like, community center and others as well. So it's important to remember that's part of this resolution as well. And again, those could be modified at a future date. They could not go up relative to the entire levy, but could certainly go down. There are a lot of things to consider as a part of this, one of which is certainly where you want your reserves to be. Are the spending options that are articulated in here matching with what your priorities are for services within the community? That's certainly a paramount thing, I think. I think this also shows very clearly your ongoing dependence on local government aid. And while the state shows its financial position as being good now, if that changed in February, that could have an impact on you and what's necessary to continue to see your operations go. We try and prioritize things like weed control and overtime and all those things that you normally would see as a part of your general fund operations. On page 34, you'll see a summary of not only the revenues, which show a reduction of about $700,000+ in revenues. Don't let that concern you. I think that's an important thing for us to mention as a part of this. The significant change in that has to do with those one-time dollars you received for some of the larger building projects that were going on. And we were very careful to make sure that any use of those funds was spent on one-time expenditures and not ongoing operations. One-time money, revenue for one-time use was what you had talked about in previous years, and you did last year as well. On the bottom of page 34, you can see the change in spending and how that would represent itself related to increases or decreases over the prior year and over the prior year's budget. And then, of course, the reserve number is on the bottom of that page, or on the very right-hand side, where we show that we think that you're going to end up this year at about 54% of reserves. But with the budget that's proposed for 19, you would be just slightly over that at 50.05. We would anticipate that taxes would change for a house of about $150,000 at just a little bit less than $9 if their valuation doesn't change. If their valuation does go up a significant amount, of course, the amount would be greater than that. We've anticipated in the table on page 36 a 10% increase in value just to show what could happen there. And that would mean somebody's taxes on a $150,000 house would go up right around $90.
If I can interrupt for a second there, Todd.
Sure.
That is somewhat true, but not really. If everybody's house went up 10%, their taxes would not go up.
That's very fair.
Okay.
Yep, that's very fair. We try and illustrate this so people have some idea of where things are going to be at.
Right.
Certainly, when they receive their tax statement towards the end of the year, that's the best articulation of their individual
Right.
property.
But I know people, I get asked,
Yeah.
my property went up 10%, value went up 10%, I suppose my taxes are going to go up 10%.
No, that's not necessarily
Not
the case.
if everybody's goes up and the budget's all, everybody's budgets, school, county, us, all stay the same,
Stay the same.
your taxes will not go up.
Yep. Starting on page 37 and 38, we have some charts related to expenditures in various departments, revenue comparisons, and the percentage of budget that goes towards certain types of activities within your overall operations, including where revenues come from, property taxes. I think it's important to remember that, again, local government aid is more than 40% now of what your budget is. Now, that might seem odd as compared to 18, but remember your total revenue stream went down as well significantly, so that's why the percentages jumped. But you depend, our community depends on local government aid to ensure that services are provided. I also want to mention that the 2019 proposed budgeted expenditures on page 46 shows that you're going to spend over 60% of your funds on personnel costs, whether that's pay for people like me or health insurance or other costs. That is not unusual compared to other communities. That's very similar to what you see in other communities. It takes people to make those plow trucks go. It takes people to mow the parks. It takes people to come to your council meetings and explain issues that are going on. So I wanted to mention that. And then, as you can tell, page 47, through the resolution, which is on page, I'm paging through very quickly. Starting on page 102 is the resolution. So there's 50 pages or so of very detailed material, past year's expenditures, and what we're projecting for the future year. Mr. Mayor, I promised that I wouldn't talk for an hour, so I'm going to stop unless there are questions.
You did it. Questions for Todd? Todd, I know you explained it a little better toward the end, but at the beginning there you were talking about 50.01 and 50.1 or 71, and then you went to 50.5.
Yes, that's correct.
Those numbers are not related. The first two are, but that 50.5 is a number for reserves.
For reserves, that's correct.
Right.
Yeah, it just happens to be that they are similar in
Right.
nature.
But I mean,
Yeah.
at that point, it was, so when we talk about that, can you connect a dollar figure with that? What our reserves are?
Oh, so our reserves would be right around $3 million, just slightly over $3 million.
Okay.
The council has a policy that says between 35 and 50% of your next year's planned expenditures should be in reserve. And so that's one of the numbers that we use to show, obviously, that we're meeting the policy and that you have reserves adequate to meet the benchmarks that you've set. Let me mention one last one on page 32. One of the additions to this memo, besides one error in number and one omission that we left in the memo from last Monday night, is that we did add, you indicated really clearly to us that there were a number of issues that you want to talk about at a future workshop. And 3 of the most prominent ones are listed here on page 32. And so they include equipment certificate and how funding might be changed, whether to use cash or debt service, or whether equipment might or might not be included. In addition, you wanted us to have a discussion about emerald ash borer and tree replacement. And so that's one that will be certainly on my list as we move forward into that next round of discussion. And then another one that was just touched on very, very briefly as a part of the pavilion discussion, but I didn't want it to be lost, is that, as you may be aware, you are receiving or have received a commitment from the Schmidt Foundation of $100,000, and they wanted you to match that with reserve funds of $100,000. It's important to note that that reserve amount was not earmarked within this budget. So that would be an additional $100,000 of use of reserves. So in addition to the 150-ish, 53-ish that we've articulated previously. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear and we were all on the same page there. Again, happy to answer questions.
Okay. Questions? Steve?
I know, Todd, you just touched on this briefly, but at page 27, the equipment certificate is $557,000. Is that what we had talked about on Monday on a workshop?
Yes,
Okay.
it is the number that was included in the documentation for Monday at your workshop.
Okay.
That is an unusually high one, and it's driven by a couple of larger pieces of equipment. And I think part of your discussion at the workshop, at least from my perspective, was that we could mix and match and move around what cash we were using for what and what was the best way to do that. So I think we plan to have a discussion on that. The only difference on page 29 there, Councilmember Grams, is that the amount listed for the SCBA equipment was left out. It said XXXX there. We forgot to fill in that number in that memo. This is not the total amount of that equipment. That equipment is around $194,000, $195,000. But this would be the amount that we would presume that you could put on an equipment certificate towards that equipment.
Okay. Well, I'm not questioning the items at all. I think they're all very valuable pieces of equipment. So I would just couldn't remember the dollar
Yeah.
amount. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
number's not changed.
Anyone else? Todd, in looking at this, and just for simplification, so this tax rate, this 50.71 is the worst possible scenario.
I don't want to say that's the worst possible scenario because it could depend on value information that comes in later, but I believe that's the case.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have to set a rate, or the, so that's.
Really, technically what we set is the amount of dollars that you're levying.
Right.
And the rate is a calculation
right.
from that.
Got it. Yep.
That's why I'm a little bit hesitant,
Yep.
Mayor.
I understand. Anyone else? If not, the resolution for the 2019 preliminary levy appears on pages 102 and 103. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any more questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Quan.
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have a request for city assistance for the haunted hayride and the snowmobile show. Todd?
Mayor and members, that is the request that's in front of you starting on page 104. I do want to mention that last year you took this as two separate items, and so this year they've been combined. The Snowmobile Association was involved in both of them last time, but now they're organizing in a little bit different way, and I think it'll be much more efficient. Compared to last year when you took two separate actions, there are not a lot of what I would consider significant changes. Certainly, they've honed this down a little bit and become more efficient in how they're looking at this. But it includes using the area of the Mill Pond Park for a couple of weekends, and then the area of Grace Street for half of that block. That's where the snowmobile show, vintage snowmobile show, would occur. The letter from the group, the Trail Association, is on page 106, and you'll see an ad for this. There it is for the snowmobile show, which would be on Saturday, October 20th. The resolution is on page 110. Again, it's important to note that they'd be using the municipal parking lot for parking for the event in the Mill Pond. They have done just a very excellent job of providing trailers and accessibility for everyone in those trailers. They look to install a tent or canopy where they'd put people and some things that they'd be looking to sell, and we would provide them use of that area and Riverside Park. As some of you may be aware, there's kind of a trail back there to the south of the Mill Pond that they would utilize. And of course, we want them to communicate with the abutting property owners so we don't get police calls on a Saturday night. Oh, there's a crazy man out there with a chainsaw. Although that might be true, it's part of the fun, those evenings. So I just wanted to mention that. And of course, they have to provide the required level of insurance, which is $1.5 million. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have, but the resolution's on page 110 and 111.
Questions? I know they have an ad, but the snowmobile show is only for the one day.
Correct, just for the one day,
The
yep.
rest runs for a couple weekends, okay.
Yep.
There are no questions. Jerry, or Steve, I'm sorry.
Todd, I promised my 6-year-old grandson I'd ask this question tonight. He wanted to know if the area down by the floodplain is going to be full of water, if it's going to be a haunted boat ride.
We have not had that discussion with them, but certainly, if that's a concern, we can bring that up. It's possible that that might be a requirement, I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Thank
I'll
you.
I'll let him know.
All right. Maybe just go out on a limb.
Would that be more fun, I guess? is
Go out
the
on a
bigger
limb,
question.
Steve, and answer it yourself next.
Somebody will fall over.
Anyway, the resolution requesting assistance for the Trails Association, Snowmobile Trails Association Hayride and Snowmobile Show appears on pages 110 and 111. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll approve the motion. Second.
Any more questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Klum.
Aye.
Mayor Zima.
Aye.
Councilmember Clayton.
Aye.
Councilmember Brandt.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grant.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next, we have another request for city assistance for the homecoming parade. Todd.
Mayor, members, that starts on page 112, and it is for Friday, September 28th, so that's coming up very closely. I do want to mention that the information that we had on page 112 about when the parade would start is incorrect. This is correct, and the resolution is correct. And so the parade really will start at 4:30. I mentioned the memo 5, that's my error. The parade is at 4:30. If I didn't mention, the parade would be at 4:30. And so that is right in the resolution. You may note that we have a map here that shows the parade route. We are going to work with the student council to make sure that when folks are watching the parade, they are in a more specific area than over the course of the entire parade route. So in other words, we really like people to be along 3rd Street when the parade is ongoing. And although they've asked for the parade route to be essentially from the middle school on Lincoln Drive, going east on Broadway, and then south on 3rd Street, and then west on Gray Street, they're trying, I think, to articulate that that's going to be their setup area, but the parade really isn't going to get going until the corner of 3rd Street. And so we're going to work with them to make sure that that's clarified and we provide the appropriate safety precautions along that. It's a little bit, it's not a great spot necessarily for a parade route to occur where lots of pedestrians or Tootsie Rolls are thrown. So we want to make sure that we provide clarity for that. I think the school is doing a good job on trying to make sure that this is organized appropriately. Image is shown. The letter from the student council is on page 113, and the resolution is included on page 115, again with the parade starting at 4:30.
Questions? Susie?
How does this vary from previous years? I seem to recall this route going down Broadway in the past.
Yeah, it doesn't really vary a lot from previous years, although from my perspective, we've never thought of the parade route from Lincoln Drive to 3rd Street. That's certainly been where they've traveled with floats and other things, but that wasn't where we've tried to congregate onlookers. So
So they're starting the football field up on Sunrise.
that's kind of their staging area.
Is that what they've
how
done in
they're
the
looking
past,
at
or have they done Lincoln Drive in the past?
it. It's been some of each, I believe, John. I could be wrong, but I believe it's been some of each.
I will still be in front of my house looking for Tootsie Rolls. That's the corner of Grace
I don't
and
blame you.
Washington, just so the school district knows, the event organizers know.
Wait for the next snowfall, I'll be by and throw some out there for you, while you're waiting. Any other questions?
One
Jeff?
quick one. As far as the parade route goes, are we going to actually be signing "Do Not Park" along that route too?
We are not likely to do that on Broadway or on Grace.
But
We plan to handle it in the same way we've handled it on Third Street for a couple of parades that include St. Patrick's Day and the small parade that goes on with Oktoberfest. And so that they have been signed, no parking on and off. We haven't towed anyone. On occasion, as you're aware, businesses in that area get very concerned when it's signed no parking because it hinders access to them. So I'm just saying,
Especially
we
on
handle it
Friday.
and it works and it's a little bit mushy.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we're probably
Yeah.
talking about this more than we even need to, but I just want a few points of clarification. So, in the past, I think what you're saying and what I recall is that traffic is still flowing the opposite direction on Broadway or on,
We have not closed off that street for other
Right.
traffic.
so there.
Third
is-
Street, we have.
Right, so there still will be traffic on Broadway, there won't be any traffic on Third Street. Thank you.
That is our plan.
So if one of the concerns is pedestrian safety, could we just state to them, to remind them specifically that candy shouldn't be thrown out along Broadway and to wait until they get to Third Street? That would probably be
That's a great plan. I will try and make sure to articulate
Right.
that to the school.
perfect, thank you.
Anyone else?
John, she didn't say anything about Grace Street.
Candy on Grace. Traffic is blocked both directions.
Fair game. Grace is fair game.
Resolution authorizing city assistance for the high school homecoming parade appears on page 115. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or requests for Candy? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Bowman.
Aye.
Mayor Zima.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Resolution is approved. Next, we have the Minnesota Square Pavilion project authorization. And Todd again.
Mayor and members, there's information included in your packet starting on page 116. This is very similar to what you saw at your workshop. Let me go through just a little bit. You established a best value committee, and part of their mission was to work within the aesthetic parameters that were set as a part of the 33-member task force and the report that you accepted back in 2012. What they are recommending to you includes some modifications to that original design. And there were 3 options that were primarily reviewed for, by that committee related to the square footage and the design of the facility. And again, they made their report on Monday night to you. Let me show just a picture. This is a picture of what they would contemplate as the new design. I don't have a picture of the old design here, but you did have that in your packet previously and on Monday night. It's very, very similar in nature. And again, I think from the perspective of that committee, many of whom sat on the original task force, this does represent what they were looking for from an aesthetic perspective. The committee looked at a few, I believe it was 7 or 8 primary change areas, one of which was a reduction in perimeter lighting. This would not change lighting that's interior and shines out from the pavilion itself. There was a change in concrete, the amount of concrete, which was not insignificant. It would go from about 16,000 square feet to about 12,000 square feet. And then in addition to that, a modification related to the stage. The original concept had an elevated stage about 30 inches or so. This concept does not have an elevated stage for a couple of different reasons that we can discuss further if you'd like, or if you'd like me to articulate it, I'm happy to answer a question about that. But does include a portable stage that the city would purchase as a part of this project and maintain and provide. It includes a modification to the brows, so on the ends of the facility, you see those overhangs, and they kind of have an arch there. The original design had, all 4 had arches. The current, or the recommended design, includes 2 having the arches and 2 having what would be siding and other aesthetic treatments that make it look a little bit like an arch, but they wouldn't be arched. That's not insignificant because it does have to do with the amount of structure that's needed. In addition to that, there was an area on the original design that was an outcropping of that brow and needed to heft up the structure quite a little bit. And so by making them all flat, or making, well, they would all be flat, that saved some money as well. The next one is the overall height was reduced. I think maybe that's more accurately stated as being the third level is more of a cap, an ornamental cap, than it is structurally significant. In the original design, it was structurally significant. It had windows, and that was an additional cost. And this is one of the areas where they talked about the amount of steel necessary was reduced by over half, if you may recall. And so that height issue is significant. The second storage room that was originally planned for this has been removed. That saved almost $80,000, give or take a little bit. There are two primary reasons for that, at least from my perspective. One of which was it allows this to be much more look-through than the previous version was. Second of which is that storage room was really thought of for a couple of different primary purposes. One of which was maybe it's where you store tables and chairs before the wedding or the event that's going to go on there. I think from my perspective and the committee's perspective agreed that we probably don't want to be in the chair and table business. There are lots of people that do that, and if you're having a large event there, you're going to have the rental place come and deliver them that morning, and they'll show up and get those set up for you. The second item was related to storing rec equipment there. Rec equipment is something that we probably bring down day of for any rec program, and so the need for that seemed less than under the original concept. They also reviewed the square footage totals, and you saw information about that. This version has about 8,300 square feet. The committee did review a version that was about 6,500 or 6,600 square feet. Frankly, that price tag was only about $85,000 less than the larger footprint, and the committee, I think, felt very clearly that, not that it's not a small sum of money, but for the value that you would receive for that $80-some thousand, it was well worth having the larger facility at about 8,300 square feet. Roofing material was also discussed. The original concept included standing seam metal roof across the entire structure. This shows shingles on the lowest level and the middle level, and then some type of contrasting, or maybe it's a copper-colored or bronze-colored standing seam roof on the top. That is certainly something that the council will have additional discussion on relative to maybe that's an alternate as a part of the bid. But right now, this is the concept that's in front of you. And the budget changed from about $2.1 million to about $1.6 million, of which you have a couple $100,000 from the state of Minnesota. You have some foundation dollars and some other donations that have come in, so that the impact on taxes as it relates to how you might raise taxes to pay for the debt service on this isn't quite concluded yet. There's still some more work to do, and as you know, you've talked about that as well. One last item, a graphic that we showed previously, relates to some of the specifics related to the overall building plan, and this slide is really meant to articulate that the covered seating would be about 8,000 square feet. Talks about a roll-down cover over a sink. Some people have talked about a kitchen. This has never really included a kitchen. There hasn't been any place to really cook here. There's been an area to serve and some water opportunity to wash things, and so that has stayed the same throughout. And then, of course, enhanced electrical opportunities, which are significant to some of your larger users. Rock Band, Blues Fest, others need more amperage and a lot of things related to making sure that they can make it go. One last item that I'll point out for those heavy users is that this still does maintain a pretty good ceiling height, so that their ability to hang amps, speakers, and lighting as a part of the presentation would still be kept in place. The resolution on page 122 contemplates a couple of things, one of which is that staff is directed to provide for preparation of plans and specifications. As you know, you don't have a 100% completed set of plans. We've been working off concept in about 30 to 40% plans, so this would provide for that to take place, that you would allow for solicitation of bids in two phases, first of which would be the demolition of the existing structure, footings, foundation, and possibly superstructure. The steel portion of that could be included in that. That would really be left to some of the discretion of your construction management team. And then the construction of the pavilion is based on option 2, which is the Although there will be steel, it's primarily wood framed, and so that is shown as a part of this at about 8,000 square feet. Staff is further directed to initiate the hearing process for issuance of a general obligation tax abatement bond. As you remember at your last goal session and at previous meetings, you've talked about some opportunities or some processes by which you would fund this. This is the least expensive way to go about that, and there's a series of hearings and notices that need to take place, and we need some direction that says go forward and try and make that happen or start to make that happen. So that's what's intended to be included as a part of the resolution on page 122. Mr. Mayor, that's all I have for you on that one.
Questions? Steve?
It's really not a question, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank the folks, the city employees and the two gentlemen on our council that were involved in the Value Engineering Committee. It's been a long time, and I appreciate the thought process that the council has gone through. It's been a long time, and I appreciate the fact that the council has not thrown this to the wayside, but has kept it out there, in addition to all the other new amenities that our city has gone through in the last 6 years. So I just want to thank the council and our city for that.
Well said. Susie?
I had a community member ask me, state a concern that the valuation committee didn't have enough carryover from the original pavilion committee. But as I looked down his list of names again, that's not really true. So we've got a couple of council members who were both, well, mayor and council member who were part of that original team. Certainly the city staff who were part of that, and then our Parks Board's representation. At least one, maybe both of those individuals, I'm not sure, were on the original committee as well. So there certainly is a carryover there, and people who remember the original vision who were part of this value engineering process as well. So they haven't thrown by the wayside all the ideas that the community had as that first discussion in 2012.
No, I think it reflects very well, what we went through 6 years ago. Ed?
Talked to quite a few people over the last couple weeks about the pavilion, and a lot of people, everybody I talk to agrees that something has to be done. A major portion of the people think that 1.6 million is way too much money to spend on it. Taxes are going up, they said, because probably the levy's going up. Taxes are going to go up because of the pavilion. They got school tax. And I had a lot of people voice their concern about it.
We have control over a couple of those, and one of them we will be discussing the budget part of it to begin with. This part of it here, it's always, for me, it's always a struggle. I've used this before, between wants and needs. Years ago, this started out as a want to me, the pavilion that is, and it's become a need. I know the tax thing is always on our minds, or it should be. The other thing, Ed, is we have to see what something like this, or we can't really put a number on it, but what this brings to the community. And where's that balance? I don't know. But I mean, we'll be working on trying to find funding for this, other than, from our creating a levy. We've started doing that. So, but the other one, the budget-wise, we'll be still working on that to try to take care of that. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, just a lot of people voice their concerns. There's
Sure.
a few major events in the park.
Right. But it does get used a lot other than that, those major events, for family reunions, weddings, that type of thing.
No, I'm not arguing that something
Right.
has to be done.
Right.
I'm just arguing
But how
about the
much it
size
is.
and
Yeah.
so forth.
I think, it's a balance there, and I'm not sure if this is the right balance, but hopefully it is.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah. Anyone else? If not, the resolution authorizing development of plans and specs and receipt of bids for the 2018 Minnesota Square Park Pavilion project appears on page 122. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved?
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye.
Councilmember Fuller.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
No.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Klon.
Aye.
Resolution passes with one name. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. First thing I have, it was a joint committee of the whole between the Hospital Commission and City Council last Thursday night, I think it was, wasn't it, Ed? Ed and I
Yep.
were there up at the new remodeled, changed, relocated therapy department up at the hospital. And looks like an impressive site. I know the Herald had an article on it, and you get an idea there if you don't get a chance to get up there, but there is a grand opening coming up on October 4th from 3 to 5 for the public. The only other thing I have is some of us I know tomorrow evening have a REDA, a Regional Economic Development Authority, meeting up at Gustavus tomorrow night. So just a reminder for those that signed up to go to that. That is tomorrow night at 5:30. That's all I have.
Mayor, members, just a couple of quick ones. First of all, to continue to remind folks, and many folks should have gotten a postcard about the polling place change in November. So if you voted at the Armory previously, this go-around you will be voting at Johnson Hall at the fairgrounds. So again, if you previously voted at the Armory, you will be moving, your polling place will be moving to the fairgrounds. So we want to make people are really aware of that. And if you have questions, please give us a call. Let us know. We'll be happy to try and answer questions as best we can. I also want to mention Minnesota River Valley Transit fare modification. The board there made a modification of fares, which will take effect January 1st. Watch for some more information about that. There was a very nice article in the St. Peter Herald that kind of showed that, just how that fits together, and we'll have some more information on our website and Facebook over the next week or two. And it'll be important for people to watch for dates as transition dates occur. So please watch for that. We know that the people that use transit need transit. And so the board doesn't take these things lightly. They're very serious in the discussion. I think we talked for over almost 2 hours on fares that day, hour 45 minutes, maybe almost 2 hours. So we want to make sure people are aware of that. And Mr. Mayor, you covered the tour, so that's all I have, other than showing the map of where you go to vote. Want to mention that one as well. And then, of course, this slide, which shows where you can contact us if you have a question or you want to visit about something.
All right. Anyone else? Anything to add? Steve?
I didn't have a chance to say this before, but I just want to, again, personally thank the city staff and our Public Works Director for the fine work that they've done in getting the grant and updating Hallett's Pond so that the fishing pier and the walkway is accessible to all people. And that truly is a step forward, and I truly appreciate the work that the city has done.
Okay.
Can I follow up that?
You can.
We don't want to give anybody the misimpression. Even though you approved purchasing the pier tonight, it doesn't mean it's going to be installed this fall. It's likely installed in the spring, so we just want to be clear with everyone. That's likely what happens. And since some of you were predicting snow by October 10th, John?
27th.
27th, something like that, we just so that everyone's aware.
Well, if I wheel out there and I sink, I hope somebody will be there to pick me up.
You better have floaters on it.
Okay, all right.
If nobody's there, Steve, just go ahead and sing.
Okay, excellent. Okay.
Any other comments? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second it.
All in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Done campaigning now?
No.
What I thought. I told Woody, don't wait up.
And they don't